Hello, everyone, and welcome to our free January webinar, the Paid Diagnostic Review, Your Key to Successful Cleanups. As you're joining me, let me know in the chat where you're joining me from. So where are you joining me from? I always love to see all the people that are joining us from all over the world. It's so exciting to talk to you, even though sometimes I don't talk directly to you, but just to talk with you. And let me know in the chat. There we go. We got Irina from Virginia, Larissa from Texas, and I see people from all over California, Orlando, Austin, Wyoming, Houston, North Vancouver, Missouri, the UK, Nova Scotia, Canada, Pakistan. So I always love to see where everybody's joining from because it's so exciting just to see that we come together and to learn together, and especially because I get to share the things that I'm doing and that are working very well in my business, and being able to share that with you. So see some people from Australia, Canada, Fort Worth, Texas, howdy, Seattle-ish area, that was Sarah. And so again, welcome everyone to our free webinar. And we will be talking about the paid diagnostic review and how you can use that to really make your cleanups go a whole lot easier. So welcome once again. So as you're joining me, I'm going to go ahead and change my presentation. And hopefully that works. Awesome. And so you should be seeing now the presentation that I will be giving you guys. If you have to leave early, no worries. I will be sending the recording to everyone who registered. So don't worry about that. And let's get started. So in case you don't know who I am, my name is Veronica Wasek. I am the CEO and founder of VM Wasek. I'm an entrepreneur, educator, accountant, influencer. I'm the as I said already, CEO and founder of VM Wasek. We specialize in accounting, bookkeeping, and consulting for Shopify and Amazon sellers. Very active in social media. You might know me from 5-Minute Bookkeeping, my blog, my YouTube channel, as well as my Facebook group, 5-Minute Bookkeeping with QuickBooks Online. And I also run an online academy for virtual bookkeepers, which I will tell you a little bit about later, but that is called the 5MB Academy. I live in Sugar Land, Texas, so howdy to all of my Texas friends. And I am originally from Chile, so if you notice that I have a slight accent, that is my Texas Chile accent. I am a CPA and advanced certified in QuickBooks Online, and I have been named a top 100 as well as a top 10 pro advisor, and I'm a member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network. So just a few administrative announcements. There is a handout. If you're able to see the handout, there's a tab in your webinar. I'm not sure what in your webinar window. There's a tab that says handout. You can download the handout directly from that. If you don't see the handout, Jesse Harris, who's one of my team members, will share the link with you as well, so you can download it from that. And if you still have trouble getting the handout, please don't worry about it, because we will send the link to the handout as well as the recording to everyone who registered for the webinar, which, by the way, was over 700 people. So again, I'm just amazed and thankful that I can share all this information with all of you. And let's see what else. In our agenda today, we will be talking about getting paid to do a diagnostic review for clients. We will talk about the diagnostic review process, positioning yourself as a specialist, and methods for pricing cleanup work. So let's go ahead. Oh, and I forgot to mention, let me go back to our announcements about the questions in the chat. So feel free to use the chat. You can talk amongst yourselves. But if you have a question for me, please put it in the Q&A. So put your questions for me in the Q&A tab. Jessie Harris is assistant, my team member, my right-hand person, will be helping to moderate the questions and making sure that they are questions about my presentation. Please don't ask me questions about other things. If you have questions about other issues you're having with QuickBooks or anything else, you can ask those questions in my Facebook group. And you can also enter a question in the chat and mark it as a Q&A as well. But I will focus on the Q&A tab with your questions, and I will leave plenty of time to answer your questions towards the end of our presentation. All right, so what are the challenges of pricing cleanup work? And by the way, before I talk about cleanup, I'd like to define what a cleanup is, because sometimes people get confused when we're talking about cleaning up a client's books. So basically, generally speaking, when you take on a new client and maybe they've attempted to do their own books, or perhaps a relative tried to do their books, or someone, maybe a bookkeeper that maybe didn't know what they were doing, or an accountant, or someone else that was doing the books, was trying to do the books, and the books are now messed up. So they're either messed up and or incomplete. A cleanup is where we take the books from that messed up state to then getting the books to a point that they're meaningful to the business owner, they're accurate, they're reconciled, and they're tax ready for tax preparation. So what are the challenges of pricing cleanup work? Well, you're not getting paid to diagnose the books ahead of time. You have no idea what's wrong with the books. You have no idea how to price that cleanup work. You may price by the hour, and the client gets a sticker shock when they get your invoice, and then they don't pay you, or don't pay you for all the amount that you wanted to invoice them. There's no agreement with the client on a desired outcome, and the client tries to control the process. Now, this is exactly what happened to me when I started my business, and even a few years into running my own virtual accounting and bookkeeping business, was that I would get a prospective client, they would have messy books, and I would just say, oh yes, I'll take a look at your books. I would do it all for free. I would give them a list of everything that was wrong with their books. I would give them the list. I would tell them how much I thought it would cost to clean up their books, and then they would just walk away, crickets, never heard anything, because I was doing all of this for free and not really, and I didn't really know if I was working with a qualified prospect. So what I will show you today will definitely help you to not just get paid for diagnosing your client's books before you do a cleanup, but also working with a qualified prospect so you can move them along in your sales funnel, your sales process. Let's start by talking about the diagnostic review. What is the diagnostic review? It is a paid project. You assess the health of your client's QBO data. You diagnose problems and assess the level of cleanup needed. You identify transactions that need to be brought up to date, and you get a clear scope of work. The value of the diagnostic review. So we talk a lot about value pricing, about understanding our value. So what is the value of the diagnostic review to you and to your client? Well, for you, you will learn what the client is like to work with in a much smaller engagement than you would trying to do a giant cleanup and then finding out maybe you don't like this person, they're unresponsive, they don't want to pay you. And so it's reducing a lot of your risk. You can get a clear scope of work reducing any surprises along the way. I mean, how many of you have done a cleanup and then you thought you knew what you were cleaning up, and then when you dig deeper, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that all of this was so messed up. You will give the client a recommendation of services, which places you in an advisory role. So instead of the client controlling what you're doing and telling you what needs to be done, you're the one telling the client. So it puts you in control, and it lowers the risk to the client as well, because now they're engaging you for a smaller project rather than diving into some big project. Why charge for the diagnostic review? To qualify the prospect, to see if they are able to pay for your services, and also because someone that would pay for a diagnostic review is someone who values working with a specialist or with an expert. It demonstrates that you are a specialist. It compensates you for time invested in diagnosing the box, and you deserve to be compensated for your time, your effort, and your expertise. And it took me a long time to get there, to tell my own self I deserve to be compensated for the things that I do for my clients, and I shouldn't be giving away such a valuable service for free. And it's okay. I'm checking the chat, making sure everybody's good. Looks like everybody's good. Awesome. Okay, so let's continue. How much should we charge for the diagnostic review then? If we're going to charge for it, how much should we charge? It really is based on what works for you. Keeping in mind that we're not doing this project to get rich, okay? So it's not going to be this like I'm making all my money from diagnostic reviews. It's a way, again, to be paid for the time and effort that and expertise that it'll take you to diagnose your clients' books and give them a recommendation of services, but also understanding that we want to move them along in the sales process. And so we're not trying to get rich off of the diagnostic review. We're trying to move them along so that then we'll do the cleanup, which should be a profitable cleanup, and then moving on to monthly services. So for example, what I have found that works for me is pricing based on revenues. So for example, let's say that up to 500,000 in revenue, you may charge 300 to 500 US dollars. 500,000 to a million in annual revenues, then you may charge 500 to 750 US dollars. And then over a million, it may be over 750, maybe 950 US dollars. So it's up to you how much you want to charge. I have certainly increased my pricing along the way, but choose something that works for you and that is very, very easy when you're talking to that prospective client to give them a price right away. Because the idea is to basically sell that service when you're talking to that prospective client. And I will talk more about that in a bit. So now let's go over the selling process. And I know that most of you don't like selling. We don't like the word sales. It's scary. It's I think in general in our profession, in our industry, we hate being sold something because we can spot a sales pitch a mile away, and we just don't want to sound salesy. So what I want you to think about when we're going to use the word selling. Okay, when we're selling to a client, we're not really selling as much as we're listening very closely to all of their pain points, all of the things that they're telling you that are frustrations to them, the things that they're dealing with, and they will tell you, okay, and you need to listen to it. I used to not listen to it. I used to just say like, okay, they're going to tell me all these things, and I'm just waiting for the part until I tell them what I think the service is that they need. But listening to all of the pain points is the most important thing. So in order to become a good salesperson, you need to be very, very good at listening. And we're going to listen for pain points. When our prospective client is telling us, my books are messed up, I tried to do my own books, but I'm not sure if they're right. I synced QuickBooks online to, fill in whatever app, Square, Stripe, Shopify, Amazon, you name it. They tried to sync QBO with an app, and now their books are messed up. My last accountant bookkeeper messed up my books. My bank balance in QuickBooks Online does not equal the bank balance on the bank statement. Or my employee or loved one, whatever relative has been doing the books, and I need someone to check them. So these are all of the things that, again, they're going to tell you that are frustrating them, the negative emotions, and we need to listen very closely to that. And when I'm talking to a prospective client, I'm taking notes. I'm always taking notes, and everything, all their feelings, all their frustrations, I'm writing it all down. So based on all of these pain points that they're telling you, then really at the end of the day, we want to get to a point of saying, here is what I recommend. Okay, so when we recommend the service, now we're not selling, we're not convincing. We cannot convince someone of something if they don't see the need and the value, you cannot convince them. So you can recommend. And so you tell them, here is what I recommend. That's what I always say. I never push anybody, never force anybody, never try to convince anybody. So we're having a conversation with a prospective client. We have listened intently. We validate all the negative emotions, and then we go into, here's what I recommend. So never selling, just recommending. And here's what I say. I recommend doing a paid diagnostic review of your books so that I can get a clear picture of what's wrong with your books. At the end of my review, I will go over my findings with you, and I will also give you upfront pricing for my services. So very simple. We need to do a paid diagnostic review. At the end of the review, I will go over my findings with you, and I will give you upfront pricing for my services. So very simple. And in fact, what I'm teaching lately is like, you need to remove the emotion away from that conversation. So you want the client to emote. The client is the one that needs to bring out all the emotion. And our fears and insecurities and like, will they buy this? Will they not? You need to set it aside. I mean, it's very normal to feel fear, to feel insecure, feel that anxiety. I still feel it, but we have to set it aside, and we have to be very matter of fact of, even think about when you go to a doctor. Your doctor doesn't sit there all emotional like, oh, you have this terrible disease. The doctor is very matter of fact. Here's what I found. Here's what I recommend as a treatment. So you need to be, put on the doctor hat and tell your client what you recommend. Now let's focus on workflow basics. So what are the steps that are involved in doing this paid diagnostic review? And in case you didn't know, I love workflows. I love systematizing things. I've been doing that since I was a little girl, always wanting to systematize, always wanting to improve and do things in a way that someone else can do it as well. So in the QBO diagnostic review, we will start with a paid we will perform the diagnostic review first. So once you sell the diagnostic review, the client pays you for it, you perform the diagnostic review. You will prepare a report of your findings and recommendations. You will determine the services needed for that client. It might be catch up, might be cleanup, it may be coaching services, coaching and training, and maybe monthly services, whatever that is. You will then come up with what are all those recommendations of the services that you recommend. You will then price those services. So if you're doing a cleanup, and we'll talk about pricing that cleanup here shortly, you will come up with that pricing. If it's coaching and training, price that. Monthly services, price that as well. Then you will schedule a Zoom meeting with your client to present your findings and recommendations to the client. We'll go over this as well. And then you will sell additional services. And by sell, I mean you just keep saying, I recommend. Okay, so you now recommend additional services. Now let's discuss performing the diagnostic review. All right. So how are we going to now perform this diagnostic review? First, we start by requesting information from the client. So we need to onboard this client. And again, assuming, number one, that they have paid us in advance. Okay, so we have been paid in advance. Now we're onboarding this client. So we're going to request accountants access to their QuickBooks online. We're going to request PDF copies of their business, bank, and credit card statements for the period being reviewed. So for example, now we're getting a lot of cleanup clients that need all of 2020 cleaned up. And so we will request their business, bank, and credit card statements for all of 2020. Our clients upload all of this directly to us. We use box.com. So as long as you're using some sort of document sharing app, then your clients can just upload all of that directly to you. And we also will request a copy of their last corporate tax return. Now, here in the US, that would be for an S corporation, a C corporation, and a partnership. If they are a sole proprietor, we don't request their tax return because it's a personal tax return anyway. But we do request their corporate tax return. The reason is because we generally, for those types of entities that I discussed, again, here in the US, we have to reconcile the balance sheet, the opening balance sheet per the books to the balance sheet on the tax return, if there is a balance sheet on the tax return. So what are you going to review as part of this diagnostic review? And the system that I developed is really very detailed because we really want to get at all of the things that are wrong with our clients' books, and really when we come back with this report to have a very thorough report of what we found. So in this checklist, we're going to review topics such as the tax return reconciliation. So as I said, reconciling the balance sheet to the tax return balance sheet. And by the way, we're not reconciling, we're just, again, looking for problems. We're diagnosing problems. So one would be whether the balance sheet on the books reconciles to the balance sheet on the tax return. Banking, I'll talk about that in a moment. Undeposited funds, so we're checking for all of these things. Undeposited funds, we'll review the profit and loss report. We'll review the balance sheet. And again, we're reviewing it for the period that we need to clean up. So again, as I said, if we're cleaning up all of 2020, we're going to review all of 2020. If they have accounts receivable and accounts payable, we will review those agings. We'll review the chart of accounts, products and services list, payroll, inventory, sales taxes, and then if they have a specific industry niche, then we'll review for those things as well. So for example, my niche is Shopify and Amazon sellers, and there are specific things that we review for those types of sellers on their books. Here's an example of what we review for what we call banking, okay? And so this is an excerpt of the checklist that we use. And just as an FYI, the period being reviewed is January 1 to December 31 of 2021. So I was using sample data, which I used in data 2021. I know we haven't started that year yet, but that is just what you'll see based on the information that I put down here. So we're reviewing, first we're listing actually the business banking credit card accounts. We'll make a note of the last date that the accounts were reconciled. We will review for old uncleared transactions in the bank reconciliation. And when we find those items, then we make a note of what that was. So for example, we found 131 items from December of 2020 to December of 2021 are still uncleared. And the total of that is a negative $36,960. We will review also if there are any auto adjustments or changes to the bank reconciliation, which we found an issue here with this difference of $38,000. We'll review whether the account is connected to the bank feed, and we'll also review whether there are old transactions in the bank feeds window. And as we're reviewing for all of that, then we're writing down, making notes of all of the things that we found that are wrong. And as you notice, we if we can, we'll get a count of those transactions. We'll get a transaction count, we get the date range, and we get the dollar amount. And the reason we do that is because when I'm going over this report with the client, I want to kind of, I know it's a little mean, but I want to sort of emphasize that pain that, like, yes, your books are messed up, and this is how badly they are messed up. And so I want to show them details. I want them to know that I know what's wrong with their books. Same thing with a business credit card account. We go through the same thing. We check for all the same things, and then we jot down all of that information and fill out the checklist. Then we have a section for findings and recommendations. And you'll notice that I said this is for the client's report. So as I'm going through all of this, getting all this information, then remember that our role is to recommend. So here's what I found, here's what I recommend. And so I will then write down a phrase like, okay, here's what I recommend. Prepare bank reconciliations from October to December of 2021. Review and clean up old uncleared items in the bank reconciliations. Adjust the reconciliation opening balance difference for statewide bank, and then add and match transactions in the bank feeds from January through December of 2021. We wouldn't do it in that order because first we'd have to add all the accounts before we would reconcile, but we would do all of that. So that would go on the client's report, and I will show you that in a moment. And then we have a section for work to be completed, and these are our internal notes. So if there's something that I want to remember or that I need to do as part of the cleanup, I will put it here. A lot of times I'm copying and pasting from the findings and recommendations to work to be completed. And in some cases, I will even add the estimated hours to complete that section of the cleanup. And I'll talk about using hours and using those to calculate pricing later, but it is a good way to, once you get good at cleanups, to estimate how long it will take, because it helps you to also manage your cleanup projects. Okay, so how did we find some of these things that are wrong with the books? So first of all, if you notice here, when you go into the bank reconciliation and it says your account isn't ready to reconcile yet, your beginning balance is off by $38,000. So you see that and you notice that that's what I included here. Okay, so we have a difference in the reconciliation of $38,000. And you can actually click on this blue where it says this blue link, we can help you fix it. You can click on that and actually see. Generally, QBO will show you what happened, what transactions got deleted, what was changed. So that's how you know. So that's one way of, you know, how do we find these problems? Okay, that's where we look. Here's another. If you go into their last reconciliation report and you scroll down on that reconciliation report, you will see a section that says uncleared checks and payments. You will also see a section that says uncleared deposits. And this will list all of the transactions that were entered into QuickBooks but have never been cleared in the bank reconciliation. And in case you didn't know, sometimes you will do a bank reconciliation, you will get that zero difference, and you're thinking, I'm all reconciled, right? But no, you're not. A very important part of doing a bank reconciliation is to actually then go back and look to see what's unreconciled, because the old transactions that are unreconciled are duplicates. Most of the time they are duplicated, or they're invalid transactions. Maybe they got entered by mistake. But it's very important to clean up all of these old uncleared transactions. Now, once in a while, if you have a client who writes checks, you may have old checks that haven't cleared. And sometimes it's because the payee didn't deposit the check. And if so, then you want to talk to your client about that. Or sometimes you have old payroll checks, and there's a whole other way to deal with those. I won't get into that for purposes of this presentation, but you do need to review your reconciliations for old uncleared checks and payments or old uncleared deposits. And you can do it by viewing the last reconciliation, or even open the bank reconciliation window, and you'll be able to see all of those old uncleared transactions. Here's another example from our checklist. This is the income section of the profit and loss diagnostic review checklist. And it'll take you through some questions. Are there any negative or unusual balances in the income account? Are there any transactions in uncategorized income? I mean, how many of you have seen uncategorized income? There's a reason why that's there, okay? Is there anything in sales of product income that maybe needs to be mapped differently? Sometimes a balance in the services income account as well. Are there any sales amounts recorded as deposits? If you have a client who invoices customers, and then you see deposits recorded in income, generally you have duplicate income, and you probably have a really big balance in undeposited funds. What else are we reviewing for? Any loan proceeds recorded as income, or any sales tax recorded as a deduction to income. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that we're reviewing in the income account. And then we're entering our findings, whether it needs cleanup, whether it's okay. In the comments, we'll enter, okay, what did we find specifically? So for example, we have negative balances in the income accounts under job materials. We'll make a note of the number of transactions, the date range, and the dollar amount. And then if there are any internal comments, we will make notes as well. So let's take a look at that in a couple of these. So when we're looking at the profit and loss, and we in this example, we are reviewing from January through December of 2021. And we can see here that There's this service income that we probably needs to be categorized to consulting or some other type of income and not just sort of a generic service income. We have uncategorized income. So these are transactions, generally speaking, are deposits that are not applied to invoices. And then we have job materials. Now, it's under income, but they're negative. So maybe it's even expenses they're not income, they're expenses. And so we need to we need to recommend that, we need to review the products and services list. Here's another example. If you drill down into what's in uncategorized income, then you'll see these deposits. Okay, here's a refund. Here's some sort of additional payment, some sort of deposit. So all of these need to be categorized to the correct account or applied to the correct invoice. And another example of a client who invoices customers that when we're looking at their income account, we should see invoices as income and not deposits. So when a customer who invoices when a client, rather, so let me say that again. When your client who invoices customers is recording deposits directly to income, that means that they haven't applied those deposits to the customer invoices. And generally, you will see a lot of transactions in income as well as a lot of transactions in undeposited funds. And here's another example of our checklist. This is the checklist for the liability section of the balance sheet. We want to verify that there is a positive, or if you're an accountant, a credit balance in accounts payable. And if there isn't, then okay, we may need to do some cleanups. In this example, we found a negative $76,000 in the account and noted that there are several unapplied bill payments, meaning that the client entered a bill payment but didn't apply it to a vendor bill. We will verify that there are no negative balances in the credit card liability accounts unless they have been reconciled. There are no other current liability type accounts that may have old or unusual balances. We'll review payroll liabilities, making sure they're clearing out. We'll review sales tax payable if the client has sales tax, make sure that that looks like it's clearing out as well. We'll review that and ensure that the interest portion of notes payable is being recorded correctly. We see that a lot for clients who have loans, that they're recording the full loan payment against the liability instead of breaking out the interest portion, expensing that, and then recording only the principal payment to the liability account. And let's see, we'll verify that there are no long-term liability accounts that may have old or unusual balances. And one of the things that we see a lot on the balance sheet is transactions with accounts with old transactions. And when something goes on the balance sheet, it doesn't leave the balance sheet. If it's, if there's something is messed up and it's just sitting there, it doesn't go away because the balance sheet is cumulative. So everything on the balance sheet on an account is there from day one. And it doesn't leave that account unless something causes it to leave the account. So if we or the client entered incorrect transactions on a balance sheet account, then they're not leaving the balance sheet. They will sit there until they are cleaned up. All right, so let's take a look at some examples and looking at the balance sheet. We can see that we have negative accounts payable. We also have payroll liabilities, and we have this federal income taxes payable account with a negative balance. I'm not even sure if that's even related to a payroll liability or not. It might be just corporate income taxes. It's hard to know. So that would be something that would need to be reviewed, would need to be cleaned up. And then we have a bank loan and an equipment loan that need to be reviewed and reconciled and cleaned up. And here is the detail of the bank loan. And a sure sign of knowing whether the interest portion of a loan payment has been recorded is to look and see whether this amount changes. So if it doesn't change from month to month, it generally means that the client has not reflected the interest expense portion of that loan payment. And then we can see here there's $644 that was paid to Great Statewide Bank. That is looks like this payment it's not posted to the right account because they have been paying East West Bank. All right, let's keep going. Another sample checklist, the review of the chart of accounts. We're looking to see if the accounts that are being used are reasonable for the client's industry. If maybe they have a really long chart of accounts that might need some cleanup and condensing. Are the account types used correctly? Are account numbers used correctly if they are being used? And again, a section for findings and recommendations, and then a section for us internally for the work to be completed. So if you're wondering, hey, how do I develop all these diagnostic skills? What am I reviewing for? There is a free playlist on my YouTube channel that you can go to. I work my way through the income, cost of goods, expenses on the profit and loss, as well as the balance sheet. And make sure that you that you go to the handout and get that link to view all of those videos so you can learn more in depth what I'm talking about here and be able to start implementing what I'm teaching. All right, see, we have questions. I will get to your questions in a little bit. And let me check the chat, make sure that we're doing okay. Yeah, we're doing good. Awesome. Okay, so now let's talk about that report of findings and recommendations. So we have talked about the fact that we can provide a client a paid diagnostic review, that we should be charging for that paid diagnostic review. We talked about performing the review. And the next step is then to prepare this report of findings and recommendations so that we will have really a deliverable, a very nice deliverable for our client, something professional to show our client and to go over it with them. And just as a reminder that you're acting as an advisor and that you're showing your client what you found and you're giving them an expert recommendation of what needs to be cleaned up. And there is value in that. Again, and it's, I think a lot of this has to do with our mindset, how we view our own role and how we interact with our clients. I think sometimes we focus so much on what we don't know that we forget about the things that we do know how to do. And also the fact that we don't have to have the answer to everything. All right, the value of the report of findings and recommendations. It's a professional report. It positions you as a professional, as an advisor. It helps to communicate your value. I know that many of you have told me you have trouble communicating your value. Well, this is a great tool to help you communicate your value to your client, because as I said, we cannot convince anybody that they need our services if they don't believe in our value, if they're not already willing and able to work with you. You cannot convince them, okay? But you can certainly communicate your value and be able to really, again, establish yourself as someone who is there to help your client and is someone coming with solutions. And it shows that you've got your stuff together, because no, we're not just jotting down something on a piece of paper. We're giving someone a professional report. So how do we go over the report with the client? We will do a Zoom meeting with them or some sort of virtual meeting. I know now you can do Google meetings and all sorts of other meetings, but so Zoom, whatever that is, but we do want to do it face-to-face, virtual face-to-face with our clients. You will go over the report with the client. I generally show them the problems in QuickBooks, so I will have the report pulled up on my screen. I will have the QuickBooks pulled up on my screen, and I'm sort of toggling back and forth, showing them. And at the end of doing that, I will give them pricing for the cleanup. And the meeting generally is 45 minutes to an hour. This is the cover page of the report, so it'll have the customer's name. So Modern Global is our sample company. That would be your client's name. And it'll say QuickBooks Diagnostic Review, or whatever you decide to call your service. And then report of findings and recommendations prepared by, and then you can put your name or your company logo. And remember when we were going over the checklist for banking, I generally copy paste that checklist and put it in the report, just because I have everything already nice and neat and organized. And then I will list my recommendations, and I will copy paste. If you recall, let me go back. Oh, it's taking me a little bit to find it. Okay, so if you remember this findings and recommendations for our review of the banking section, we'll take that and then we will add it to the report, and I just put it in bullet format, so it's easier to read. Okay, so the same recommendations that I had on my checklist, I will add to the report. My goal is really to spend as little time as possible writing this report. So I write put things on my checklist the way I would write them on the report, and then I can copy paste and then format them on the report. For the profit and loss review, generally I'll have a small little section just explaining why it's important. Why is it important for your profit and loss to be clean and meaningful? Okay, and what are we reviewing for? And then I will list my findings and recommendations. Again, I will pull those from my checklist and then copy paste onto my report. And as I said, I do recommend showing like the volume of transactions, if you can, the dollar amounts and your findings, just because I think it drives your point across more clearly to that client. Same thing with the review of the accounts receivable aging, what we found, what we recommend. So in this case, clean up the negative balances in accounts receivable totaling $40,995. Okay, so we have gone through the checklist. We have gone through the report of findings. But how do we price a cleanup? And I think that is the million-dollar question. I think everybody wants to know how to price. First of all, I need you to understand that pricing is a journey. Okay, so you will not be good at pricing on day one. You may not be good at pricing 2 years from now. But I don't know if would I say I'm good at pricing? I don't know. But the point is that you have to understand that you are on a journey in your business overall, with your pricing especially. You're on this journey, and you will learn along the way. So you will learn things as you go through your journey. You're going to make mistakes. You will definitely make pricing mistakes. I have made my share of pricing mistakes, but you will learn from every mistake that you make. So you, the mistakes that you make are your MBA, okay? They're going to be your advanced degree in pricing. And the way that you need to view then your mistakes, they're really valuable lessons because you will never make that same mistake again. I have made my share of pricing mistakes, as I said, but my pricing mistakes have been my most valuable lessons and my most profitable lessons because I never made the same mistake again. So, did I do work before ever getting paid? Yes, several times. And then I finally was like, okay, never again. I'm always getting paid up front for my services. Did I underprice? Yes, but then I learned I charge more the next time. Did I charge less than other people? Yes, and then I continually have increased my price. So as long as you understand you're on this journey, you will make mistakes. Those mistakes are valuable lessons, and you forgive yourself now for any mistakes that you will make. You will let them go and you will focus on the positive. Then that's where you need to be. Excuse me. So that's the start of your journey. All right, so now we can talk about pricing because I want you to take all those negative thoughts away and focus on then how are you going to go about your pricing journey. So let's talk about some cleanup pricing strategies. There are generally three methods that you can use for pricing your cleanup projects: hourly, fixed price, and a range. So if you go with the hourly method, which I know a lot of new bookkeepers are using, the challenge is that you don't know how much to charge. You just only go by an hourly rate. You're not sure about the scope. So you might dive in and not really even know what it is you have to do to get the books to a clean state. Your client may not pay, and many times they don't pay because you put in more hours than they thought you were going to, and then they don't want to pay you. And you're also doing, most of the time, you're doing work up front, and you're also doing, most of the time, you're doing work up front and not getting paid for it. And really, most importantly, I think you haven't agreed on an outcome with your client. So your client is purchasing hours. They're certainly viewing it that way. And then they wonder, like, why is it taking so long? Because they've only purchased hours instead of purchasing an outcome and understanding the extent of the mess that you have to clean up to get to that desired outcome. Another pricing method is using fixed pricing. You provide upfront pricing to the client. The client knows exactly how much the cleanup will cost. They will agree to pay you because you've given them the pricing up front already. You agree upon an outcome with that client, but you must be confident that you have properly diagnosed your client's books, and you do risk unexpected surprises that you didn't include in your pricing. For a time, I was doing fixed pricing, and remember I said it's a journey. I decided I actually needed to do to give the client a range instead, just to give myself some wiggle room in case we found things that we didn't know about. And generally speaking, we always find things we didn't know about, even though we do these very in-depth diagnostic reviews. So the third strategy, which is what I generally use, is to give the client a price range. The client knows that your pricing won't exceed the maximum that you gave them. You still agree upon an outcome with your client, and your pricing factors in those unexpected surprises. So how much should you charge then? Okay, so now that we understand the methods for pricing, how much should you charge? Because again, I know you're all wondering. Okay. Well, first you need to know your value. You can value price cleanups, but you have to understand the value. And it really goes back to the negative emotions that the client expressed in the beginning. Remember when I was talking about really listening very intently to our prospective client? That's where the value comes from, is you alleviating those pain points and then getting their books to a clean state, because that's what it's going to alleviate the pain points for your clients. And I'll skip this example just because I think I'm taking longer than I expected. But just as just long story short of working with a client that where I understood the value of what I was bringing to them, of alleviating a lot of the pain points that they were having, and ended up charging this client. Initially, it was 12 to 15,000. I think we ended up charging the full 15,000 to and clean up their books, go through consulting and coaching and integrations with them. So let's talk about pricing methods then. Method number one, the amount that you charge for monthly bookkeeping, so you take the amount that you would charge for monthly bookkeeping and you multiply it by the number of months that you are cleaning up. So that's one method. So say, for example, that you were going to charge them $500 a month. You multiply it by 12 months, the number of months that you're cleaning up, and that's $6,000. Some people think you should mark it up because cleanups are more involved. Some people mark it down. I tend to mark it down just because we have more efficiencies when we're doing a cleanup. We're not touching the books 12 times a year, but that's totally up to you. But in my example, because I'm telling you what we do, we'll do a percentage of the monthly, and in this case is 75%, so that gives us $4,500. And then what I tell the client is the pricing will range from $4,000 to $5,500. So I'm just sort of giving myself some wiggle room. This is a faster method of pricing, and it is the method that I currently use. Method number two, estimate the number of hours that it will take times your desired hourly rate. Make sure that you add administrative time. Make sure that you add time for communicating with the client. That was something I forgot to do in the beginning. So for example, let's say that you estimate 24 hours to clean up times $100 an hour, and I'm just using that for the sake of doing easy math. So that would be $2,400, and then I add 20% for administrative time, so that's $2,880. And so I may tell my client the pricing will range from $2,900 to $3,500. This is, however, dependent on your ability to estimate how long it will take to clean up certain areas. And you can develop those skills by doing more cleanups. Regardless of what you choose, make sure that you're getting paid upfront at least 50%. So make sure that you take a deposit from your client of 50%, or that you are charging for a minimum number of hours times your hourly rate. Some people charge for a 10-hour block and then just keep adding 10 hours. But I'm a big believer in giving clients upfront pricing, using a price range, and taking 50% upfront and then 50% near completion. All right. So key takeaways from the presentation today. A paid diagnostic review helps you to qualify the client. It lowers the risk for the client and allows you to get a clear scope of work. You position yourself as a specialist by diagnosing your client's books and recommending services. You give the client a price range to allow for surprises, and regardless of how much you charge for a cleanup, always get paid for at least 50% of your fees upfront. All right, so if you're wondering, Veronica, I love this system. How can I learn more? Do you have a course in which you can teach me your QBO Pay Diagnostic Review System? I do, actually. Glad you asked. So I mentioned earlier that I do have an online academy for virtual bookkeepers. It is the 5MB Academy. So you can find that at 5mbacademy.com, and hopefully Jesse will share that link with you. And so take a look at that. There are lots of free courses and resources as well as paid courses. One of the reasons why I started 5MB Academy was really to elevate your role as a virtual bookkeeper and really to empower you to work with confidence. I know that many of you have told me, hey, I've taken the bookkeeping course, or I've gone and taken these classes. I've gotten certified in QBO, but I still don't feel confidence. So my courses help you to not just gain that confidence, but also to have systems that you can use, things that not only is it a system, but it's a system that works. And to help you accelerate your journey. It's taken me years to figure out a lot of the stuff. And so my goal is to help you accelerate your journey so that you can go faster and have the success that I have had, but not have it take 10 years as it has taken me. So when you go to the 5MB Academy and you scroll down, you'll see all the different courses, as well as they're grouped by area. So like advisory, cleanup, marketing, pricing, and workflows. And if you want to purchase any of the Academy courses, you can always get a 10% discount. Discount code is 10OFF, all in lowercase, TENOFF, as you can see there in the red bold text. So any of the paid courses and resources, you can get 10% off. One of the themes that I've come up with this year in particular is bigger, because I want to have a bigger impact on you. I know that many of you have not purchased some of my courses because I haven't offered payment plans. So one of the things that now I'm doing in 2021 is to help you have a bigger impact in your business and with your clients, is now giving you payment plans. And so wanted to tell you about my new pricing, and in particular related to the QBO Pay Diagnostic Review System. So as I mentioned before, if you are interested in purchasing the full course, full of videos, tutorials, checklists, engagement letters, sample reports, all the step-by-step showing you how to do this pay diagnostic review, then the QBO Pay Diagnostic Review System is the course that you can take from my academy. You can take it at your own pace because it's all online, and it has everything that you need going through my full process. So the price for this course is $497. You can get the discount, again, 10% off, but now you can also buy it for 4 payments of $137 a month, which I think is a no-brainer, because either way you will make this money back by doing one diagnostic review. The difference between the one-time payment and the 4 payments, aside from it being 4 payments, is that with the 4 payment plan, you will get the lessons over 4 months. So it's also a good way, not just easy on the budget, but also a good way for you to take it slow. Okay, so you don't feel like, oh, I have to take this course all at once. You'll take it over the next 4 months. So again, 1 payment of $497 or 4 payments of $137. And I've given you the link where you can purchase that. But you might be wondering also, hey, well, do you also teach cleanup? And I do. I have a cleanup course. And in fact, you can bundle the diagnostic review course with the QBO cleanup. And it actually gives you the best price because you get both courses for $997 or for 6 payments of $185. And again, if you do the payment plan, then you get access to the lessons over 6 months. And again, it's a good way for you to just sort of take it at your own pace and not feel like you have to do it all at once. And if you do the course bundle or get the cleanup course, then you also can be in my private student Facebook group and ask questions of me directly, as well as ask questions of the community within that group. But if that weren't enough, I will also be giving live courses starting next month. So we will have courses in this very same format. They'll be 90 minutes long. We'll talk about communicating value, your pricing, marketing, all of the things that will help you to attract clients and work confidently with clients and help you communicate your value even more. So they'll be monthly, 90 minutes long, very high value, actionable content. You'll have me directly live. You'll be able to ask questions. It's only $97 per course. Guys, it's a bargain. I think it's part of, again, I want to have a big impact on you. Look for those announcements, and Jesse will share with you the link to sign up to be notified about all of, if you're not already, sign up to be notified about all of my courses, webinars, and free content as well. And I will have included in your handout several testimonials from my students. Take a look at it, but basically, like one of our students, Michelle Sloan, her cleanup work increased by 350%, and that she now does paid diagnostic reviews on all her clients, and she's thrilled. So take a look at those testimonials and check it out. Let's see, what else do we have? All right, so yeah, go to the 5MB Academy, 5mbacademy.com. And now I'm going to switch over and go into Q&A. Oh, we're doing good with time. Awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at the Q&A. And I am able to answer all the questions, so that will be my aim and my goal today, to answer all your questions. But please keep the questions related to to this presentation. If you have any others, you can ask them in my Facebook group, or I'll let you know. Okay. So Chelsea is asking, what do you do for a sole proprietor that hasn't been using QBO and comes to you after trying to do their own books and said they just didn't do a very good job of it? They don't have any of the reports because they weren't using accounting software. I'm thinking it's the case of an envelope full of receipts, but I'm not sure how to approach. That's a great question, Chelsea, because the diagnostic review is really specific to someone who has tried to do their own books on QBO and then had issues and couldn't do it or messed it up. When they don't have any books at all, what I have found is that there is value in you helping that client come up with a strategy for setting up their books. Okay, so it's not just that I'm going to sell you a setup, because it's hard to price something when you don't know what they have. Sometimes they have spreadsheets, or maybe they have commingled their accounts, and so you have to get them to a state of chaos to now we need a strategy for what it will take to set up your books before we set up the books. And I think that strategy is valuable, and it needs to be priced. I don't do a whole lot of it because our just of the niche that I have is we do other things. But if I was doing this for a client and I needed to charge for it, I would charge a minimum of $250 to just like, okay, send me what you have. I will review what you have, and then I will come back to you with a recommendation. So again, it all works the same way as the diagnostic. I'm going to review something. I'm going to review what you have. I'm going to give you my recommendation, and we'll go over it together. And then I'm going to give you pricing for the next service, which would be a setup at that point. So I hope that helps. Lantha is asking, do you think that a basic QBO certification is enough for this type of review, or do you recommend getting the advanced before attempting this? Well, that's a great question, Melantha, and it's not so much about the certification as much as it is the training. So I would highly encourage you to go through the advanced certification training without focusing so much on passing the advanced certification, because you'll likely get stuck and get frustrated. So if you go through the training, which I think is much more valuable, then by all means, if you want to get the certification, you can do it. But make it your goal first to just get that training, because it is advanced, hence the name, and it'll help you to do that. But keeping in mind also that QuickBooks is a software, and you can be certified in the software, but they're not teaching you bookkeeping. So if you don't have a good foundation for bookkeeping, then you need to get that as well. So whether you're going to accountingcoach.com, going through their training, getting training locally from a community college, going to bookkeeper launch or universal accounting, you still need that bookkeeper training as well. Natalie is asking, do you usually recommend a pay diagnostic review to every new client, even if they don't think their books are this, if they are aware of it as a pain point? Sometimes people think their books are fine when they're actually not. That's, again, a great question. And I actually had a sales call yesterday with a client who was basically saying that they're not happy with their current bookkeeper, but they're going to let that bookkeeper finish 2020, and they want me to take over with 2021. And I said, well, that's great, but I can't work on messy books. So I will look at your books for 15, you can look for my free 15-minute smart review on the 5MB Academy. And I will look at their books for only about 15 minutes. That's how long it takes me. It's a much shorter list. And so what I told the client is I will take a quick look. If I see that there's anything that needs to be cleaned up, then I will require a paid diagnostic review, which I know there will be, but at least it's, if they think like, oh, my books can't be that bad, then I will just point out a few things that, oh yeah, I see uncategorized income, I see unapplied cash payment income, undeposited funds, blah, blah, blah. And then just say that I require a paid diagnostic review. And if they're not willing to go for it, then they're not an ideal client. Let's see, Richard is asking, if they become a client after the diagnostic, have you ever put their diagnostic payment towards their monthly cost? This way it seems like an incentive for signing on as a client. I do not, but some of my students do. And I think it's your business, and you make the choice that works for you. But if you think that would help you to move the client along, then by all means, yeah, you can do that. But the point is, don't do the diagnostic review for free. And like you said, if you want to apply it for the next service, that's fine. Candace is saying, I see some are offering a free review to get them in, and then they just stay with them. How can you justify that you're charging when they compare to those big box firms? Okay, Candace. Sorry, I'm like taking a deep breath because I'm about to impart wisdom. Okay. These are some of the things that I will be teaching in my live courses, because it's all about how you position yourself and how you communicate your value. And if you've seen some of my videos, you might have seen a video where I talked about why does someone go to Walmart for a $4 t-shirt, and why does someone go to Nordstrom for a $98 t-shirt? Okay, clearly they're not the same customer. They value different things. Okay, and so our goal is to we don't need to compete with QuickBooks Live, with Bench, with all of these like cheapo bookkeeping. I'm sorry, maybe I hope I'm not offending anyone. With lower cost bookkeeping services, we don't need to compete with that, because we need to position ourselves as someone who is someone who can solve problems for our clients, someone who's bringing solutions, eliminating pain points. And then we're looking for a subset of those clients that value that. So am I trying to sell a $4 t-shirt? I'm not. Maybe I'm not trying to sell a $90 t-shirt either. Maybe I'm selling a $30 t-shirt. So it's just a matter of figuring out where you want to position your services, your offering, and where are those potential clients that are going to resonate with what you do. And please stay tuned for my paid courses, because you will see that I will start peeling the layers of that onion, showing you how to do that, because you should never be competing on price. I have never competed on price. It's all about positioning, branding, niche, and the problem that you solve in your sales conversation. Carol is asking, when you clean up, do you undo past reconciliations? Wondering about keeping work separate from previous work. Much easier to undo, but just a thought, as you mentioned, reconciling going forward as opposed to redoing the whole year. So when we clean up our books, we do whatever it takes to get the books cleaned up at a transactional level. Okay, so we're not doing like journal entries and moving stuff around. We are cleaning up at a transactional level. I don't worry about an audit trail. Number one, we're going to start using Rewind to take backups of our clients' files before we do a cleanup. And number two, QuickBooks maintains an audit trail of all the changes made anyway. So if we have to undo a reconciliation, we undo it. Thui is asking, what do you do with an LLC? You might have, I think I need a more specific question, because I'm not sure what you're asking me in relation to that. Maybe it has to do with whether we request a tax return. An LLC is a pass-through entity in the U.S., and so if the taxpayer hasn't made an election, then they are taxed as a sole proprietor, unless they are then taxed to unless they make an election to be taxed as an unless they make an election to be taxed as an S corporation or a partnership. So I think I answered the question. Okay, Jacqueline, do you charge different types of fees for setup versus cleanup? Is moving a company from one type of accounting software to another cleanup or setup? Okay, so I'm going to answer your second question first. Is moving a company from one type of accounting software to another cleanup or setup? Is actually what I call a migration, so data migration. Depending on if you're actually moving physical data or importing. So if we're taking data and physically then importing it into QuickBooks as a data migration, it does involve some level of setup as well, but in my mind, I view it as a separate part of a big project, but a separate part of that project. It is not a cleanup, and I do charge separately for a setup versus a cleanup. Noah is asking, I may have missed it, approximately how long does a diagnostic review take you to perform? It can take 3 to 5 hours depending on the client and what I'm reviewing. And that's why I was talking about trying to make the report as easy as possible by copy pasting, because that can take time to do. And then keeping in mind also that I will likely spend up to an hour going over the report with the client, which is, I think I view it as part of it is I'm going over the report with them. Part of it is also my sales process as well. Ina is asking, how do you find clients requiring QBO cleanup in Canada? Well, I think any client, any business owner who has attempted to do their own books has generally messed up their books. And so really everybody who comes to us generally needs a cleanup or catch up or something. So I think it's just more about refining your conversation and your messaging, which I will also teach you in the live courses, because sometimes we're saying things that let's say you're going to a networking event, or that you're maybe on social media and you say, I do bookkeeping for blah, blah, blah. Well, people don't necessarily understand what that means, or they assume it means something when it really doesn't. And so you might need to start saying, I clean up the books of construction companies, for example, like being more specific. Or even organized is a word I use recently. I help to get your business financials organized, because a business owner views it as that, like, you're going to help me get organized. They're not sitting there going like, I need reconciliations and I need, my chart of accounts set up. So you have to use words that resonate with your ideal client. Maida is asking, can you please go over the undeposited funds account and the best way to fix it? Maida, I did a free webinar last month on, I forgot what we called it, QBO. Oh, sorry, my brain just went, but it was my free webinar last month. Yes, it was tricky QBO transactions. And I talked about cleaning up undeposited funds. I also have free YouTube videos on my YouTube channel where I go through and